You have 5 minutes to leave this bank." The words cracked across the marble lobby like a gavel slamming down. The man in the navy suit leaned forward, finger stabbing the air toward her phone as if it were contraband. His voice carried not just authority, but a cold certainty, like he had already judged and sentenced her. She didn't flinch. Not once. Her calm was a blade sharper than his anger. With one hand, she slid her leather briefcase closer, the initials AW catching the light for a fraction of a second. With the other, she steadied her phone on the counter, thumb resting silently on the glass. Her answer was simple. 5? More than enough. The lobby rippled. A few heads turned. The uniformed guard near the door shifted his weight, hand brushing against his belt. A teller in the back whispered to her colleague. And the young man standing in line for a cashier pulled his phone up slowly, the red light of his camera reflecting off the marble wall. This wasn't just customer service gone wrong. This was theater. And everyone in the lobby had just been given front row seats. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. She stood still, perfectly still, as the storm gathered. The bank manager's words hadn't been a mistake. He wanted them to echo. He wanted the marble walls, the polished floor, and every stranger within earshot to believe she didn't belong here. 5 minutes, he said. Like he owned time. Like he owned the building. But her silence was a counterweight. Heavy. Intentional. The truth was coiled in her restraint, waiting. One woman near the lobby chairs leaned toward her friend. "Did you hear what he said?" she whispered, shock and disbelief threading her voice. Another man frowned, muttering, "That's not how you treat a client." The tension thickened, layer by layer. The manager mistook the stillness for submission. He didn't know that behind her calm eyes was a ledger longer than his career. He didn't know that 5 minutes was more than enough time for him to destroy himself with his own arrogance. And so she waited. Not because she was helpless, but because justice doesn't shout. It arrives quietly, and when it does, it leaves no room to escape. She hadn't planned to dress for battle. No pearls, no tailored entourage, no car waiting at the curb, just a charcoal blazer, a leather case with the initials AW, and a quiet poise sharpened by years of walking into rooms that doubted her. The irony was heavy. She wasn't an outsider trying to force her way into privilege. She was the institution, the largest shareholder of the very bank that now aimed to throw her out like a trespasser. This morning wasn't random. It was deliberate. She had cleared her schedule, told her assistant to stay behind, and walked into the Heritage Community Bank branch alone. No cameras, no press, no announcement. She wanted to test something she had suspected for months, how her people were treated when no one knew their titles. She carried herself with intent, each step measured on the marble floor. The chandeliers glowed above, indifferent, while the employees below made snap judgments. Her request was simple routine even. Access to her own accounts. Confirmation of a transfer. Yet the atmosphere shifted the moment she presented her ID. The teller's smile had been brief, almost mechanical. The glance at her card lingered too long. The manager appeared too quickly, striding in like a verdict. And suddenly, a lobby designed for wealth and security turned hostile. This wasn't the first time. At 22, fresh out of grad school, she had walked into a different bank with her first down payment check for a condo. The loan officer had tapped his pen, looked at her jeans, and told her to try again with a co-signer. At 28, she had secured triple, the collateral for a commercial loan, only to be called high risk. Every step forward in her career came with a shadow of suspicion. Now, decades later, worth more than the marble under her shoes, the same look returned. That familiar mixture of doubt and disdain. The guard by the door shifted again, scanning her like a problem to contain. A young receptionist hesitated behind the counter, eyes flicking to the screen, then back to her manager. She saw something there, an entry, a status, a flag, but stayed silent. The manager leaned closer, his voice lower this time, but no less sharp. "You're holding up real clients. If you don't leave, we'll escalate." She said nothing, because she wasn't here to plead. She wasn't here to prove. She was here to measure the distance between prejudice and truth, and every word they spoke was closing that distance fast. Her phone vibrated once in her hand. She didn't answer. Not yet. She simply locked eyes with the man across the counter, calm against fury, stillness against noise. The seconds stretched, heavy as stone. And the story that would define this lobby was only just beginning. The marble lobby, once polished calm, began to hum with unease. The manager didn't step back. He stepped closer, a smirk tightening at the corner of his mouth. His finger tapped the counter like a metronome of arrogance. "Strange," he muttered loud enough for others to hear. "These IDs always look convincing at first, but then we find out they're not real." A hush spread. The young receptionist bit her lip. She knew what the screen had shown: VIP override, executive clearance, but fear chained her words. Behind her, another teller crossed her arms, shaking her head as though she had seen this type before. Then came the jab. A junior banker in a slim gray tie leaned from his desk, eyebrows raised. "I've seen this scam," he called out casually. "Fake names, flashy cards, hoping we don't check." A chuckle from the corner. A customer in a crisp suit, white hair gleaming under the lights, muttered as he passed, "Pawn shops down the street, sweetheart." He didn't even pause to look at her as he walked out. The words landed heavy in the room, not because they were true, but because they were familiar. She stood silent, hands folded, letting the weight of it all settle. The guard by the door touched his earpiece. A faint murmur came through. "Backup requested." His hand rested on the radio at his hip, ready. The manager straightened, enjoying the show. "Security will handle this. We don't need disruptions in front of our real clients." Her silence wasn't weakness, it was pressure, a coil tightening. Still, the escalation pressed forward. The gray-tie banker scoffed again. She probably Googled some numbers, printed this at home. Happens every month. The manager smirked, nodding. "Good call. Fraud patterns repeat." From the side of the lobby, a woman clutching her purse frowned. "That doesn't look right," she whispered to her husband. He hushed her, uncomfortable with the attention. The young man filming in line raised his camera higher now, no longer subtle. His whisper was audible. "They're calling her a fraud," without even checking. The tension was no longer hidden. It was declared. Every whisper, every insult was pushing the lobby toward a line they couldn't step back from. And still, she waited. Not because she lacked words, but because the storm was building, and storms reveal who people really are. The manager leaned closer one last time, his tone sharpened into command. "Escort her out." The guard stepped forward, boots heavy against marble, and the line had been crossed. The guard's shadow stretched across the counter as he advanced. Every step echoed louder than it should have, like a drumbeat announcing an eviction. Eyes in the lobby followed him, curious, uneasy, some eager for spectacle. She didn't move. Her posture was steady, shoulders squared, hands calmly resting on the leather case by her side. No panic, no raised voice, only stillness. "Ma'am, you need to come with me," the guard said. His tone was rehearsed, the kind that suggested procedure, not thought. She blinked once, slowly, then lowered her gaze, not in defeat, but in calculation. Her thumb slid across her phone screen under the counter, quiet, unnoticed. A vibration confirmed the signal sent. The manager smirked. He mistook her silence for surrender. "That's right. Make this easy on yourself." But silence has weight, and in that moment, hers filled the entire lobby. The young man with the camera shifted uneasily. He raised his phone higher, then caught her eyes. For a brief second, her gaze locked onto his. She gave the faintest shake of her head. "Number not yet." The message was clear. This wasn't about spectacle. It was about truth. The guard extended a hand toward her arm. She didn't recoil. She didn't argue. Instead, she leaned back slightly, her voice calm, measured, a whisper almost swallowed by the marble around them. "I'm not leaving." 3 words, but they landed heavier than the manager's entire tirade. The receptionist behind the counter froze. The junior banker tapped his pen faster, impatience bleeding into nerves. The suited customer who had sneered earlier glanced back from the doorway, sensing something had shifted. The manager tried to press harder. "Security, do your job." Yet the guard hesitated. Her stillness unnerved him. She didn't look like someone caught in a lie. She looked like someone waiting for something bigger than this moment. The air changed. It was no longer just about a transaction or a policy. It was about dignity, about whether silence could stand against humiliation. She lifted her phone slowly, deliberately, and placed it face down on the counter. A small green light glowed on its edge. Recording, not video, not spectacle, just evidence. Her eyes rose again, steady as stone. "If you put your hands on me," she said softly, "you'll regret it more than I ever will." The guard stopped, not because of her volume, but because of the certainty threaded through every syllable. The manager laughed, hollow and sharp. Big words. They won't save you. But already, cracks were showing. A woman seated near the waiting area shifted uncomfortably. A man near the ATM whispered, "She hasn't raised her voice once. Why does this feel wrong?" The lobby was no longer a bank. It was a courtroom, and every witness was leaning in. And through it all, she remained still, immovable, anchored not by defiance, but by the quiet knowledge that storms collapse under their own noise. The lobby had shifted. It wasn't just marble and glass anymore, it was a stage, and every person inside had a role whether they chose it or not. The young man in line, phone raised, couldn't hold his tongue any longer. "Why are you treating her like this?" he said, his voice breaking the silence. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to slice through the room. All eyes turned. The manager stiffened, annoyance flashing across his face. "Mind your business," he snapped. "This is bank protocol." But the spell was broken. A middle-aged woman seated in the waiting area whispered to her husband. She showed her ID. "I saw it." They didn't even look. The husband frowned, shifting in his chair, unease crawling into his posture. The receptionist, young, hesitant, stared at her screen again. She knew what she had seen earlier, the account flag glowing gold, the unmistakable VIP override. Her lips parted, but fear sealed them shut. Still, her hands trembled slightly over the keyboard. The guard lowered his hand, uncertain. He looked at the manager, waiting for a clearer order, but his eyes kept drifting back to the woman standing still at the counter. Something about her calm unnerved him, like she had been here before, like she wasn't the one at risk. "Fraud," the junior banker muttered under his breath. It wasn't loud, but the young man with the camera heard it. "Say that again," he challenged, lifting his phone higher. The banker's smirk faltered. "You can't film in here." "Funny," the young man shot back. "You don't mind humiliating her in front of everyone." His words drew murmurs, a ripple of agreement weaving through the crowd. The woman at the counter didn't intervene. She didn't need to. Every word spoken around her was weaving a record stronger than any protest she could make. In the corner, an elderly man rose slowly from his seat. He leaned on his cane, his voice trembling but clear. "I've banked here 30 years. Never seen a client treated like this." He paused, eyes narrowing at the manager. "You sure you know who you're talking to?" The question landed heavy. The manager's jaw tightened. He snapped back. "Yes, I know exactly what I'm dealing with." But the edge in his tone revealed something else. Doubt. The young receptionist's lips finally moved, barely audible. "Her name is in the system." She trailed off, too quiet to be heard beyond the counter, but loud enough for the woman beside her to glance sharply. The atmosphere grew thick. Every witness carried a piece of the truth now, some with cameras, some with whispers, some with the courage to ask out loud. And still the CEO remained still at the counter, not pleading, not performing, simply letting the room speak for itself. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from the person at the center. It comes from those who can no longer ignore what they see. The hum of whispers grew restless. The lobby was no longer neutral ground, it was tilting. Every camera lens, every raised eyebrow, every breath carried judgment. The manager felt it, and that made him reckless. He slammed a hand on the counter, voice booming across the marble hall. "Enough of this charade! You're wasting our time! You're not a client here, you're a fraud!" The words cracked like a whip. The junior banker smirked, emboldened, chiming in with a scoff. "Honestly, people like her walk in every week. Fake documents, bold attitude, thinking they can trick the system. This isn't the street, it's a bank." Gasps rippled. A woman near the waiting area clutched her purse tighter, glaring at the employees. A man by the ATM muttered, "That's out of line," shaking his head. But the manager didn't stop. "You've had your chance," he barked. "Security escort her out now. She's holding up real business." The guard hesitated, eyes darting between the still, composed woman at the counter and the restless crowd around them. His stance faltered, but the weight of his uniform pressed him forward. Then the assistant manager, a broad-shouldered man in a charcoal vest, emerged from the back office. His tone was cold, official, designed to crush. "We've reviewed your information. It doesn't add up. You could be attempting theft. Leave, or we'll call law enforcement." The accusation landed heavier than the marble columns themselves. Theft. A word that branded her in front of every witness. She inhaled slowly, her calm cutting sharper than any retort. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead. She let the accusation hang in the air, staining the men who spoke it. The young man filming whispered, almost to himself, "They really said theft." His phone shook in his hand, capturing not just faces, but the shift in power, the cracks of arrogance showing under pressure. The elderly man with the cane raised his voice again, stronger this time. "That's a lie, and you know it." His words cut through the lobby like a bell, drawing gasps and a few nods from nearby customers. The assistant manager sneered, dismissing him. "Stay out of this. This woman doesn't belong in this branch, and she certainly doesn't belong in this lounge." Those last words dripped with venom. Didn't belong. The phrase wrapped around the room like smoke, bitter and suffocating. Still, she remained steady. Her eyes flicked once toward the glowing phone on the counter, then back to the men towering over her, calm, patient, unshaken. The manager leaned closer, tone dripping with triumph. "You can't fight policy. You're finished here." But the cracks in his confidence were already visible, and every witness in the lobby could feel it. The storm wasn't over. It was just gathering speed. The manager's patience snapped like brittle glass. He yanked the ID card from the counter, held it up between two fingers as though it were contaminated, then tossed it back down with a sneer. The plastic clattered against marble, spinning until it lay face down like evidence discarded in a courtroom. The assistant manager stepped forward, his voice sharp enough to sting. "This is over. We're flagging this account. Fraud alert effective immediately." His hand darted to the papers she had placed beside her briefcase documents prepared for a routine transfer. Nothing more. With a quick, theatrical motion, he crumpled one sheet and tore it in half, the sound loud and violent in the hushed lobby. Gasps broke out. A woman near the seating area covered her mouth. The young man with the camera muttered, "Oh my God," as his recording captured every shred falling to the floor. The receptionist's eyes widened. "Sir, you can't just—" she began, but the manager's glare silenced her. Then came the final blow. The assistant manager reached across the counter, snatched the black credit card that bore her name, and waved it for everyone to see. "This," he declared, "is now evidence. Until we verify it, you have no access here." The word evidence wasn't procedure, it was humiliation. He dropped the card into a drawer, slammed it shut, and locked it with a key clipped to his belt. "Security!" the manager barked, his voice rising with desperation disguised as control. "Remove her. If she resists, call the police." The guard froze, hand hovering over his radio. He looked at her still calm, still unmoved, and for the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. The elderly man with the cane stepped forward, anger sharpening his voice. "You just stole her property, in front of witnesses. Do you hear yourselves?" But the banker in the gray tie smirked, doubling down. People like her always play the victim, always crying injustice when they're caught. The lobby erupted with murmurs. Phones tilted higher, fingers tapped screens. The air vibrated with tension, charged like a storm seconds before lightning. Through it all, she stood silent. Not because she was broken, but because silence at that moment carried more weight than 1,000 protests. She let their words, their actions, their arrogance pile higher and higher, knowing every stone they threw was building the case against them. Finally, she lifted her gaze, steady as steel. "You're sure you want to involve the police?" The question wasn't loud. It was quiet, too quiet. Yet it cut deeper than any shout. The manager smirked, mistaking her calm for bluff. "Absolutely. We'll let law enforcement deal with you." But his confidence was brittle, and the lobby knew it, because storms don't last. And when they break, they reveal the truth beneath. The lobby waited for her to break. For anger, for shouting, for a scene that would confirm the picture they had painted. But none came. Instead, she reached calmly for her phone. One tap, a soft chime. She lifted it to her ear. "Activate legal protocol," she said evenly as if ordering morning coffee. "Timestamp everything." The voice on the other end was crisp, immediate. "Confirmed. Documentation live. Every word is being logged in real time." The manager blinked, thrown off for the first time. "What are you doing?" he demanded. She didn't answer him. She didn't need to. Her eyes stayed fixed on the polished marble floor as if she were listening to something far away, something larger than this branch, larger than his authority. The young man with the camera muttered, "She's recording them, like, officially." His phone trembled in his hand as he kept filming. The receptionist's gaze darted between her monitor and the woman at the counter. She knew the system was humming in the background, pulling logs, flagging entries, marking every biased phrase spoken in the last 10 minutes. She swallowed hard, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. The assistant manager sneered, trying to reclaim control. "Your little call doesn't scare us. Internal complaints go nowhere." But the voice through the phone was steady, almost surgical. "All asset interactions from this branch are under live audit. Manager and assistant manager identified. Bias phrases cataloged. Incident tagged for corporate review." A ripple of gasps. A woman in the waiting chairs sat up straighter, whispering, "Did you hear that? Corporate review." The manager's face paled, though his jaw stayed clenched. "You think you can threaten me with corporate?" She finally looked up, calm eyes locking onto his. Not a threat, a record. And records don't disappear. The guard shifted, unease crawling into his stance. The authority in her voice didn't sound like desperation. It sounded like someone who knew she was holding a lever he couldn't see. From the corner, the elderly man with the cane muttered, "She's not bluffing." His words carried, soft but certain, grounding the murmurs around him. The junior banker scoffed, louder now, desperate to puncture the silence. "You think a phone call changes anything? You don't belong here." She didn't flinch. Instead, she placed the phone flat on the counter, green light glowing brighter, speaker on. The voice returned, firm as iron. "Protocol confirmed. Legal counsel en route. Estimated arrival 20 minutes. Prepare for disclosure." The lobby wasn't buzzing anymore. It was vibrating, electric. And in the center of it all, she stood calm, letting their arrogance twist into a noose of their own making. The manager's smirk was fading, but pride kept him upright. He crossed his arms, voice sharp. "Corporate doesn't care about scams. You'll be gone before anyone arrives." The room seemed to hold its breath. She tilted her head slightly, studying him as though he were already a footnote. Then, with a quiet finality, she reached for the black card he had locked away. Not physically, just a glance at the drawer, then back into his eyes. "You've just confiscated the property of this bank's majority shareholder." The words didn't boom. They didn't need to. They landed like a stone dropped in still water waves rolling outward, colliding with every ear in the lobby. Gasps burst across the room. The receptionist's jaw dropped. The young man filming whispered, "Wait, what?" His camera zoomed closer, trembling with adrenaline. The elderly man leaned heavily on his cane, nodding as if the truth had finally arrived. The assistant manager's face flushed red. "That's ridiculous. If you were who you claim, you wouldn't be standing here alone." Her calm didn't crack. Power doesn't need an entourage. It only needs the truth. And the truth is, this building, this branch, this bank, she gestured lightly with one hand, sweeping the polished lobby, the chandeliers, the rows of waiting clients, all answer to me. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the guard stepped back, his hand falling from his radio. The manager barked, desperate, "Lies! She's bluffing! Anyone can say that." But the receptionist could no longer stay quiet. Her voice shook, but it was clear. "Her name, it's in the system. Executive override. I saw it before." The junior banker turned to her sharply. "Stay out of this." Too late! The truth had cracked through. A woman in the waiting area stood, pointing at the manager. "She showed you her ID. You ignored it. You tore her papers." Others began murmuring, some pulling out their phones, some nodding in agreement. The young man filming whispered, "This is going viral. Right now." His live stream counter ticked upward. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply folded her hands on the counter, steady as stone. "You called me a fraud, in a bank I own." The line hit like a verdict. A few in the crowd gasped audibly. Someone clapped once, sharp, before the sound was swallowed by stunned silence. The manager's face drained of color, but his pride clung desperately to the moment. "Even if you are who you say, you can't fire me. You can't just—" But the lobby already knew. The hierarchy had flipped. The authority he thought he held had crumbled to dust. And she stood at the center, not shouting, not raging, just revealing. Because sometimes power isn't about what you seize. It's about what you've always had. The room cracked open like glass under pressure. Every witness who had been silent now had a reason to speak, and the weight of their voices pressed down harder than marble columns ever could. The receptionist was first. Her voice trembled, but she forced it out anyway. "She's right. The system flagged her account as owner-level clearance. I saw it. You ignored it." The manager spun toward her, eyes blazing. "That's confidential information. You'll lose your job for this." But the words sounded hollow. The crowd had already shifted. The young man live streaming grinned through disbelief. "You're watching this live, people. The woman they tried to kick out owns the bank." His counter ticked upward hundreds, then thousands. Comments poured in, scrolling faster than he could read. The elderly man lifted his cane and pointed it toward the managers. "Shame on you," he said, his voice steady, strong. "I've been here longer than both of you combined. Never again." Gasps and murmurs swirled into applause. A woman near the lounge clapped sharply, then another, until a scatter of clapping broke the tension like thunder rolling in. The assistant manager paled, sweat gathering at his collar. This is a misunderstanding," he stammered, reaching for excuses that dissolved the second they left his mouth. She should have said who she was. She shouldn't have to. The receptionist cut in, her voice firmer now. No one should have to announce their worth to be treated with respect. That line drew cheers. The balance of the room shifted fully. The guard who had once stepped forward now stepped back, removing his hand from his radio. He looked at her, nodded faintly, and melted into the background, unwilling to stand against the truth he now believed. The junior banker tried to salvage his bravado, but the words wouldn't come. His smirk collapsed under the heat of dozens of eyes staring at him like a criminal. The manager's face turned white, then red, then white again. His authority had vanished, slipping through his fingers faster than he could clutch it. This isn't how things are done," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. But the lobby had already chosen sides. Phones tilted higher. Conversations overlapped. "She's the owner. Caught red-handed. Unbelievable. Justice, finally." For the first time since the confrontation began, she moved. She lifted her phone, pressed one button, and let her assistant's voice ring out across the speaker. "Everything is logged," the crisp voice said. "Every word, every action. We're ready to execute next steps." The crowd erupted in another wave of murmurs. Some smiled, some gasped, some simply shook their heads in awe. And the managers? They weren't managers anymore. They were defendants in a trial they didn't even realize had started the moment they opened their mouths. The storm had flipped, and every witness knew they were standing in the eye of justice about to land. The applause faded into a tense, electric silence. Every eye in the lobby was locked on her, waiting, not just for a response, but for judgment. She picked up her phone, pressed one button, and spoke clearly. "Execute removal protocol, effective immediately." The assistant's voice on speaker was crisp, surgical. "Understood. Confirm targets?" Her gaze didn't waver from the men across the counter. "Branch manager Richard Hale, assistant manager Peter Rowe. Freeze their access. Lock out credentials. Effective now." The words were delivered like a verdict, and within seconds, the system answered. A sharp beep erupted from the manager's belt. He glanced down his badge, once green, now glowed red. Panic crawled across his face as he swiped it against the terminal by reflex. Denied. The assistant manager yanked his own badge, tried the same. Red. Another denial. His face drained of color. "Wait, what's happening?" The receptionist stared, wide-eyed. They're locked out." Gasps cascaded through the lobby like falling dominoes. The elderly man with the cane leaned forward, voice steady with satisfaction. "Justice, right in front of us." The manager slammed a fist against the counter, desperate. "You can't do this. You don't have the authority." Her voice cut him clean. "I am the authority. You made that clear when you tried to erase me in my own bank." The junior banker stumbled backward, pale, mumbling excuses. I didn't know." Her gaze flicked to him, unblinking. "You stayed silent when it mattered. Remember that." The young man live streaming whispered into his phone, "You're watching this live lockouts, live firings. I've never seen anything like it." His viewer count exploded on screen. The managers scrambled for footing. "We'll appeal. You can't end careers in a lobby." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You ended them yourself the moment you mistook prejudice for policy." The assistant manager lunged for the drawer, fumbling with the key, desperate to retrieve her card. But when he swiped his badge against the lock override, the drawer beeped red, sealed tight. Her phone chimed again. "Property secured," her assistant reported. "All evidence logged. Legal counsel ready to file." The room burst into murmurs. Some guests clapped openly now. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others recorded every second with awe. And the two men who once towered over her shrank in the shadow of their own downfall. They weren't leaders anymore. They were lessons. The lobby was no longer a bank. It was a courtroom. The marble columns felt like walls of judgment. the chandeliers like spotlights, every witness a juror. And in the center stood the woman they had tried to erase, calm, unshaken, carrying silence like a sword. The manager collapsed into a chair, badge blinking red against his chest. The assistant manager paced in frantic circles, muttering, searching for an exit that no longer existed. The junior banker avoided every eye, his bravado gone, replaced with shame heavy enough to bend his shoulders. The crowd had chosen. Phones tilted higher, capturing every detail. Some smiled, some whispered in awe, some clapped softly, unable to contain the satisfaction swelling in their chests. She reached down, lifted her leather case, and set it firmly on the counter. The initials AW gleamed once again. She looked around not just at the disgraced staff, but at every witness who had watched it unfold. "You wanted me gone?" she said softly, her voice carrying farther than a shout ever could. "But here's the truth. I don't need to prove I belong. You proved yourselves unworthy by trying to erase me." Her words fell into the lobby like stones in still water, rippling, echoing, unforgettable. She picked up her phone again. The assistant's voice returned, calm and precise. "All actions recorded. Terminations complete. Legal filing in progress. Do you wish to proceed with public disclosure?" She paused, scanning the room, meeting the eyes of strangers who had chosen to stand on the side of truth. Then she answered, not to the phone, but to the lobby itself. "Number. The truth has already been disclosed. Right here." Gasps and nods. A few claps turned into a wave, echoing off the marble walls. The guard, once poised to remove her, stepped forward, not against her, but to open the door in silent respect. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The gesture was enough. She gathered her things, stood tall, and turned toward the exit. Every step was deliberate, steady, carrying the weight of a verdict that needed no gavel. At the threshold, she stopped, looked back once at the room still buzzing with disbelief and awe, and delivered her final line. "Justice doesn't shout. It arrives, quiet, complete, irreversible." And with that, she walked into the daylight, leaving behind not just a bank, but a story that would ripple across feeds, timelines, and conversations for days. The clip would be shared. The staff would be remembered. The silence that once tried to erase her had become the silence that crowned her. Because she wasn't just a client. She wasn't just a CEO. She was the owner, the proof, the ending they never saw coming.